Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the vice commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Your Honor, we know that Mr. Strzok didn't go inside the Capitol. And we know that Mr. Strzok didn't engage in any violence or vandalism or theft or destruction. So we feel comfortable not seeking detainment of Mr. Strzok pending his trial. And from there, the judge did order my release. Over the next few weeks, I was banned from my organization's donor portals. I was banned from my organization's payment processors. My email services were banned. I had my legal defense fund shut down. They banned the Walkaway Campaign Facebook group, which now had 510,000 people in it. All of that was immediately just erased from existence. Over 8 minutes of shooting a video of 2 large open doors. The Department of Justice, on 5 occasions, continued my case. And this went on for over a year. And absolutely that influenced my decision to not fight harder. You've got the might of the federal government against the individual.
It seemed like every time there was a hearing, Matt would get a phone call saying the hearing was postponed. And Matt's mental health was deteriorating terribly. So he asked his attorney, I need this to end soon. And his attorney said, plead guilty. And this will be the quickest way, it'll be over. And he pled guilty in December. And the attorney then informed him, they're looking to add a terrorism enhancement to your sentencing. That sentencing enhancement would have increased his sentence from 6 to 12 months to 5 to 6 years. And that Friday, February 25th, he texted his dad several times, telling him how much he loved him. That evening, Matt hung himself in his garage.
The January 6 pardons. Americans stripped of due process, falsely accused and convicted are free at last. Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, and Truth Social Plus, and on the Rob Maness Show channel on Rumble and YouTube, by the way, folks. You just heard the truth about J6 from someone that was there. And what you will also hear today from the disgraced D.C. U.S. Attorney Matthew Graves during this show are lies. The disgusting D.C. swamp judicial system falsely accused and convicted over 1,500 Americans. And even just days before President Trump took office again, was arresting Americans on trumped-up January 6th charges. These arrests and prosecutions went so far beyond anything that has ever been done before for political protests, the word ludicrous to describe them is not adequate. The sentence lengths were astounding compared to the law that has been applied to protesters from the other side of the political spectrum in this country. Sentence enhancements were sought on defendants for no logical reasons other than Graves and his crowd have admitted than to make examples out of citizens exercising their right to confront the powerful with the truth as they understood it. Americans like Matthew Perna, who breaks my heart, committed suicide over these unfair and unnecessary enhancements. I am completely disgusted to be associated with an America with such a double legal standard system. Today, we expose Graves' lies and show you how he went after an American who never saw any rioting that day, didn't break anything, didn't go into the building. He stood outside and took video for 8 minutes. That citizen is Brandon Strzok, the leader of the famous Walkaway Campaign movement, and he joins me today to discuss the truth about his January 6th experience. Brandon, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, sir. I have to tell you, the show you did with me a couple of years ago is still the most watched episode of the Rob Maness Show that has ever occurred in the history of this show, and this is episode 469. I am so glad to see that you are free at last, my friend. I think you're muted.
My apologies. Sorry. I said that's
all right.
Yeah, no, it's an honor to hear that. That's incredible, and it's great to be back with you here today.
Yeah, I know you're extremely busy, so I appreciate you dedicating your time to our little show and our audience. But tell them the story. I mean, we just touched on it in the opening monologue and the opening clip there. But what really happened the day you were up there at the Capitol on January 6th? What's the truth about that before we get into all the lies?
Sure. And I'd like to start by saying that there are no little shows. All shows are very, very important, and any audience that we reach with the truth is hugely, hugely important, because God knows, as I was going through this for the last 4 years, my media opportunities were extremely limited, including a lot of the mainstream conservative media outlets would not touch January 6th. So I certainly don't prioritize the importance of a show based off of its the size of its audience or anything like that, because I had to get my story out small audience by small audience by small audience over the course of years. So I just wanted to say there's no such thing as a small show. But I will say that on January 6th, I was a scheduled speaker for a permitted event on Capitol grounds. And so I was on my way to do my speaking engagement when I started getting text messages from people saying that they were hearing on the news that people were going inside the building. And so I started shooting a video, and I walked up to the east side of the Capitol so that I could kind of document what was actually going on based off of what I was hearing from other people who were watching on television. And what I was seeing was not really matching what I was being told, because, what I was being told was like, oh, the news is reporting mass chaos, and these disruptions. Well, on the side of the building I was on, the east side, people were very calm. Nobody was breaking windows or fighting with police officers or rioting or being destructive. People were mostly just standing around, and what were, I guess, at once closed barricades were no longer closed. They were opened. So I guess my point is that there was absolutely no way for any reasonable person to be able to tell that they weren't allowed to be where they were, because there were thousands of people all around. There were no police officers on the east side of the building telling people to leave or that they weren't allowed to be there. There were no signs. I just walked into a crowd of people. And when I got there, there was a man at the top of the stairs of the Capitol shouting, they've cleared Congress, or they've opened the doors. We're going in, we're going in. So I walked up to the top of the stairs, and when I got there, the doors were open, and I stood outside of the building for 8 minutes shooting a video. And when, after 8 minutes, a man came out of the building and said, they've cleared Congress, everyone left the building, move out, move out. And so I immediately, at that point, turned around and I left, and I uploaded that video that I shot to Twitter. And then 2.5 weeks later, I was raided by a team of FBI agents in tactical gear who got me out of bed at dawn, put me in handcuffs, and took me to jail. And I spent 2.5 days in jail in 24-hour lockdown, knowing nothing more than the fact that I was being charged with multiple felonies for what the FBI said I had done on January 6th. That's all I knew. And when I was finally released after 2.5 days, that's when I began to learn what I was being accused of. So nobody's case is normal. So I don't want to give you the impression that there's any such thing as like a normal January 6th case, because there's not. But I will say that my case was a little bit, the reasons why my case was extra bizarre was they charged me differently than they charged other people. So even people who went inside the building, got charged with misdemeanors for occupying restricted building. I got charged with a felony for occupying restricted grounds. So they say that I entered into a restricted area of the Capitol grounds, and they charged me with a felony. They also charged me with another felony, saying that they called it impeding law enforcement. And I said to my attorney, what is this? I don't understand. There were no police officers on the east side of the building. What are they talking about? And my attorney said, well, in your video that you were shooting outside the Capitol, and by the way, I'm holding my camera above my head and shooting down because there were so many people in front of me. And my attorney said, well, there's a moment where one officer is walking through the crowd to the Capitol, and he's carrying his plastic shield above his head, and somebody grabs it out of his hand, and then someone else starts shouting, take it, take the shield, take the shield. Well, the FBI says that that's you, that you were the one shouting for them to take the shield. I didn't even witness the incident. I didn't even know that the incident happened. But they said it was my voice, and they charged me with a felony for that and a number of other things. And then I ended up taking a misdemeanor plea deal.
So let me just make sure everybody understands this, Brandon. You never went inside the building. You never even went up to the doors, right? You were outside the doors the whole time, even when you saw them, they were open, right? You never had an interaction with law enforcement.
Right.
And you didn't break anything. And I've seen your video. I didn't hear you encouraging anybody to destroy anything, go into the Capitol, any of that.
Right.
And there were no signs anywhere on the east side of the Capitol that said this is a restricted area.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. Not only did I not do that, and not only, would you not be able to hear me doing that because I didn't do it, but the whole concept that I could have done it is the stupidest thing on the face of the earth, because I've considered myself for many years to be very fortunate and very blessed. And the reason why I say that is because after I started Walkaway in 2018, the Walkaway campaign, my organization, and the movement became so successful and so well supported and appreciated by people in the conservative movement that I became fortunate enough that is my job. And to this day, it's still my job that I lead this organization and this movement. So I am in this very, very amazing and rare position where I get paid to tell the truth. Think of how many people have to go to work every day and deal with their DEI training and all the woke, stupid nonsense that's going on, and they just have to leave their body and deal with that. I'm in this very fortunate position that I get to make a living telling the truth. And the reason why I get to make my living telling the truth is because I get support from a conservative audience that is pro-law and order, that hates seeing police officers get attacked or seeing people encouraging violence or attacking. So the idea that I would go to the Capitol and film myself encouraging a crowd to attack a police officer and then voluntarily upload that video to Twitter so that my audience could watch me doing that and think that this is a good idea and that my audience is going to be like, oh, this is great, Brandon, more videos of you encouraging violence against police, please. We love this. It's so stupid. And thank God, my audience was intelligent enough to understand what was going on. But it didn't save me, because in the position I was put in, the only choice I really had was to take a misdemeanor plea deal and say that I did those things. And I did. I signed a plea deal written by the government, and I confessed to standing outside the building shouting for people to take that shield from an officer.
Wow. Well, we got to take a break, but the next segment, we're going to open it with a little video clip of the big liar, Matthew Graves. But Brandon, I want to give you a chance to talk about how you were treated in the system, go into a little bit more detail about that, because any system that forces you to admit guilt and it's a lie is a bad system, and it's got to be addressed. We got to hold people accountable. We'll be right back with Brandon Straka of the Walkaway Campaign and J6 political prisoner right here on the Rob Maness Show in a minute.
Democracy stopped for about 6 hours. The vote was counted at 3:44 a.m. With 2 weeks until Inauguration Day, it was the Trump Justice Department that set the standards for the prosecutions. Decisions were made by career prosecutors who work at justice for years, regardless of who the president might be.
The career prosecutors quickly realized that you needed guidelines in place, determinations about who was going to be charged, who wasn't going to be charged, and what they would be charged with. That process started in January 7th, 2021, during the prior administration. To this day, we continue to use guidelines that the career prosecutors put in place during the prior administration.
And how do they guide you?
What we're generally focusing on, of the thousands of people who you could potentially charge that day, are people who actually entered into the Capitol, people who engaged in violent or destructive behavior, people who illegally carried firearms or other weapons on Capitol grounds, and people who helped others to get into the Capitol building.
You're not charging everyone who was there that day.
That is correct. We have turned down hundreds of cases where the FBI is saying there is evidence here, it's your determination, prosecutors, whether you think this should be prosecuted.
And why would you turn them down?
Because they don't fit within the guidelines that the career prosecutors have been using, or we don't think that there's sufficient evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt.
You can watch the full story and the season premiere of 60 Minutes tonight, right after football.
To me, that this is President Trump.
It is Whistleblower Wednesday, and my guest is Brandon Straka, the founder and leader of the Walkaway Campaign organization and the J6 political prisoner. And Brandon, I had to show that little clip from Matthew Graves there because it is lie after lie after lie. He is a political appointee, and there is no way that career prosecutors laid down the guidelines that these people use to charge people like you. He lied and said he was only charging people that entered the building. He lied and said he was only charging people that had weapons or firearms and carried them into the building. And he continues to lie to this day, even though he's resigned. What other lies have been told, and what did you see during the process of you going through this that were just bald-faced lies? It's unbelievable.
Well, so in my plea deal, it took us about 10 months before we got to the point where the government offered to drop the felony charges against me if I pled guilty to a misdemeanor. When you take a plea deal, you also have to sign what's called the statement of offense, which is essentially a confession that the government writes on your behalf. And so in my statement of offense, one thing it said was that when I walked into this restricted area of the Capitol grounds, that I witnessed the police doing their best to restrain the mob. There were no police officers on the side of the building that I was on, with the exception of the one officer who walks through the crowd at that one point. He appears in my video for a total of about 40 seconds. And whoever it is that grabs the shield away from him, it's almost like a prank. They kind of like pass it around and then they give it back to him after like 30 seconds. Which again, I'm not like condoning that. I'm just saying it's a far leap to insurrection from that. But so they said that I witnessed the crowd, the police officers doing their best to try to restrain the crowd. They said that I stood outside the building shouting, "Go, go, go," to encourage people to storm the building, that I encouraged the crowd to take a shield from an officer. And they said that I also entered the restricted grounds knowing that the grounds were restricted and that I was breaking the law and that I wasn't allowed to be there. Like, none of these things were true. None of them are true. And I would actually argue that even if those things were true, even if I went into the restricted area knowing that I wasn't allowed to be on the grounds, even if I shouted "Go, go, go," even if I shouted about the shield, I'm not 100% convinced that any of those things qualify as more than like a citation. Like, especially if we're going to apply standards that we've applied to other groups of people who have engaged in the exact same behaviors. I was facing like 35 years worth of charges on those allegations. Never an allegation of violence or destruction or going in the Capitol or anything like that. And so, as I've said many times before, for me, it was never a question of how do I win and how do I lose. It was always a question of how do I lose the least. And for me, losing the least meant, confessing to things I didn't do and taking a misdemeanor plea deal. But it's been devastating. I mean, this is not a happy ending. Getting a misdemeanor plea deal has been, it's really crushed entire aspects of my life in ways that I'll probably never recover from.
Yeah, that's the frustrating part is, there really is no way to restore what happened to you. And, I wanted to put Matt Perna into this show because I met his aunt, Miss Perna, that was also in that first clip we showed. And, that's just that it's just not possible to restore people's lives once it's been destroyed. And, you had to, did you have to stand before the judge and plead guilty and all that? Did the judge address you at all?
Yeah. So I had to go before my judge 3 or 4 times over the course of, from the moment I took my plea deal to sentencing. And then actually a few times after sentencing as well. And that was actually one of the most kind of like sinking, hopeless moments, I think I'd say, because, a lot of us who went through this, we all shared, even though we didn't know each other before, we've all met each other afterwards, after going through the process. But it's interesting how similar all of our stories and all of our experiences are. Like, for instance, when we were first raided by the FBI and then jailed, many of us initially believed that like this was a misunderstanding, and that when we had the opportunity to explain our side of the story, they would realize like, oh, we've got the wrong person, or, we made a mistake or something. But then we very quickly realized that it wasn't a mistake, that all of the mistruths and all of the false allegations are intentional. It's on purpose. Like, they're intentionally trying to create the worst story that they can possibly create and the worst collective narrative, and that we're all just being used in that collective narrative. We're all just like, pawns in this story of an insurrection. But then I think we all thought that when the day came that we finally would get to be in front of a judge, that maybe some sense of fairness or impartiality would enter into the equation. And then there's this horrible sinking feeling when you realize that the judges are just as bad, if not worse, than the prosecutors. For them, I actually believe it's a very political thing, that for them, they're trying to kind of like signal to the media and signal to the public, like, look how hard I am on the J6ers, and I should be rewarded for that. I mean, I think for a lot of them, they saw it as their opportunity to audition to advance in the federal court system and maybe be considered, for the Supreme Court one day. or something by being like, look how hard I was on Donald Trump's, devotees. Of course, never realizing that Donald Trump would get elected again. But my judge was incredibly hostile, cruel, completely unfair, inappropriate, absolutely hated me. I think the only person she hated more than me was my attorneys. She would, during the hearings, she would sit there quietly and respectfully while the prosecution spoke. And then the moment that my attorneys would speak on my behalf, she would become hostile, contemptuous, aggressive, combative, and very intimidating, to the point where, my attorneys really didn't even want to defend me anymore. I mean, they were saying, like, we don't even want to go in front of her anymore because it's just going to be a bad experience. And that's what it was. So, I mean, it kind of became almost like a competition to see, who could be the most cruel and punitive towards the January 6th defendants.
Yeah, that's why I asked that question, because, I've read story after story and transcript after transcript of these judges in the D.C. Circuit address American citizens who were really, at the basic essence of this, exercising your constitutional right to assemble and free speech. And people don't go to jail over trespassing, which is what you essentially pled guilty to. And you didn't even trespass into the building. It was on the property. I mean, you might get a fine of $50 or something like that. But and the whole, I don't know if you were charged with the obstruction of an official proceeding initially in that felony under 1512C, but that whole thing, that happened today in Robert F. Kennedy's hearing. It was disrupted and obstructed by protesters inside the hearing room, and that's an official proceeding. Those people could be charged with that, but those people weren't even arrested. They were allowed to continue and stay in the room. So the judges, let me tell you what I think they were auditioning for. They were auditioning for impeachment. It's time that we actually impeach some of these judges to hold them accountable, because, I mean, they were calling you guys insurrectionists from the bench. They're supposed to be the objective people in the room between the prosecution and the defense, and applying the law equally, but that's not what I'm hearing they did. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. And like one example, just in my case alone, would be that when my lawyer was trying to argue to my judge that I deserved a certain kind of category of sentence, he cited other cases that she had sentenced herself, January 6 cases. One of them was a case of a man who was on the west side of the building, which is where the riot took place. I was on the east side of the building where the riot didn't take place. But he was on the west side of the building, and he climbed up the wall of the west side of the Capitol, and then proceeded to enter the Capitol through a broken window, and did that in front of everybody. And she gave him a lighter sentence than she gave me. And my attorney said, well, he climbed the wall, he went through the broken window, he went in the building, he whatever. And my judge said, I believe that Mr. Strzok's case has more aggravating factors than that man. She said, Mr. Strzok stood outside the Capitol and shouted, go, 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 to encourage people to go in the building. Now, number one, I didn't do that. But number two, the idea that shouting go, go, go is a greater offense than entering the Capitol through a broken window when you've got thousands of people behind you who are watching you do that. Like, that saying go, go, go is more of an encouragement than actually going into the building through a broken window with people watching you do it. But this is the level of like irrationality that we were dealing with. You just couldn't reason with these people. It was like a lunatic trying to reason with a lunatic.
Yeah, it's baffling. It's illogical. It's unjust. It's unequal treatment before the law, which we killed 600,000 Americans in the 1860s to implement the 14th Amendment to ensure equal treatment before the law for all people, no matter what their background is. It's just crazy. Well, we got to take another break, Brandon. When we come back, we're going to show a clip about what the mainstream media, really the regime media, is saying post-pardon about the January 6th defendants. We'll be right back on the Rob Manna Show here at Worldview 2 with Brandon Straka of the Walkaway Campaign.
To me that this is President Trump pardoning actions in the past, but perhaps setting up a permission structure for those involved, including members of the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and the like, to act out violently in the future, knowing that he has their back. How much of a concern is something like that for you and fellow prosecutors?
That's a tremendous concern, and I'm glad you raised the question. I was really moved by the remarks earlier on this program by Richard Haas about International Holocaust Remembrance Day, a day that we remember the victims of Nazi atrocities. And when we think about the lessons of that history, think about Tim Snyder's 20 Lessons from the 20th Century, and he talks about be wary of paramilitaries. And if you observed what happened on January 6th, and you saw organized armed groups like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, who organized to commit violence, consequential acts of violence on January 6th. In the case of the Oath Keepers, who brought a tremendous amount of weapons to the D.C. metro area that day. Everybody coming out of January 6th would have been wary about the impacts of paramilitary groups in our society. And now with the message that these pardons send to these groups and the way these groups are emboldened by these pardons, we have to be doubly wary about what they say to what they can do to our society.
So, Ashley, to
Welcome back to the Rob Manna Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking with Brandon Straka, J6 political prisoner, the founder and leader of the Walkaway Campaign. And quite frankly, Brandon, I wanted to ask you, when you see clips like that where you have the regime media types allowing this former prosecutor, who was an appointee to, go on and compare the people. And he didn't just talk about the Proud Boys and the Oath Keeper groups. He smeared the entire crowd there as Nazi brown shirts, Gestapo, the SS. All of that is what he's referring to when he makes that reference to the Holocaust remembrance. And that just is absolutely disgusting. And in addition to that, he's folding in more lies about, well, they showed up with large amounts of weapons in order to do harm and commit violence against the Capitol and all those inside it. And it's all just an absolute lie. How do you feel about that?
Right. Well, first of all, the majority of what I know about January 6th is from the conversations that I've had with people after the fact. You know, again, to reiterate, I wasn't on the site of the building where the riot was happening, so I can't speak firsthand to what took place. I can only speak to the experiences I've been told from other people. But I do know that, you know, leading up to January 6th, there were a number of marches that took, you know, there were two major Trump marches, MAGA marches that took place. And in both of those, a lot of people were attacked by Antifa, BLM. And I mean, it was pretty savage. I mean, they were attacking old people. They were attacking mothers with small children. They were going after everybody. And so it made perfect sense to me on January 6th when I started to see people there with, you know, goggles and helmets and pepper spray and stuff, because to me, I thought, well, yeah, people are prepared to defend themselves should they be attacked by Antifa. Well, then that all got turned upside down and used against people when suddenly they were like, oh, these protesters had helmets on and goggles and pepper spray, and why would they have these things if they weren't intending to go inside the building and attack members of Congress? And nobody was intending to do that. Nobody was intending to go in and attack people, but people did have those things on them because they wanted to protect themselves from attacks from Antifa. And so, and in terms of the weapons, it's my understanding that some people did bring weapons to DC, but I think that they were all left in their hotel rooms in Virginia, and other places. Nobody brought weapons to the Capitol. So I don't know. They're being very dishonest about that narrative.
Yeah, I think so. Eventually, I'll get Stuart Rhodes back on, I think, to talk about that. They call it a military term is a QRF, or quick reaction or quick response force. And all of that stuff, all that equipment and gear was left outside of the district because it's illegal to bring it into the district. So the plan would have been to use it for self-defense if necessary. And no laws were broken. No laws were broken for them to do that. And for this narrative to continue to be pushed, even now after the pardons, it just it boggles the mind that people want other Americans who were actually abiding by the law to be treated as if they were trying to, take over the country. It's crazy. Well, we got a live audience now on the show, Brandon, and Shell is my host over in X Spaces. So let's take a question. We got some hands up over there. Go ahead, Shell.
All right, we have Cookie, sir.
Good afternoon to you both. Brandon, thanks for sharing your story and your strong fight. Question I had, and I don't think you've talked quite yet about your pardon from Trump, but what do you kind of think? It's probably going to come when he wins. What are you kind of thinking before and when you get it, and now a week or so later you have it? What's your mind thought?
Great question. So leading up to, first there was like the high anxiety about whether or not Trump would win. But I guess if we start at the point where Trump won in November through to about a week and a half ago, I was very I've been friends with a lot of people who are J6ers now for years, and there was a whole spectrum of, some people were like 100% confident that he was going to pardon everybody, and he was going to pardon everybody on day one, and there would be no delay. Some people believed that he would pardon some of the people and not pardon other people. Some people thought we wouldn't know about pardons and it would take a long time. This might get dragged out for years. I guess in order to kind of protect myself, I just made the assumption that I would not be pardoned, and that if I did get pardoned, then I would be very pleasantly surprised. I was actually kind of surprised that it was a sweeping pardon for everybody on day one. I thought, which I'm glad. I'm glad that it's just over and that it happened quickly and that we don't have to worry about it or think about it or why did this person get pardoned but I didn't get pardoned, and will I get pardoned, and will it be next year? That would have, I think, introduced a whole nother kind of ongoing torture and torment that just nobody needs and nobody can really handle. In terms of what happened afterwards, immediately I started getting contacted by an enormous amount of media. And I mean, I literally was doing an interview within a half hour. I think I was on the Greg Kelly show, and in fact, I think I had booked that interview before I even knew if I was pardoned or not. And then afterwards, it's been kind of like nonstop doing media interviews ever since. So in a way, I haven't even really had an opportunity to fully process what it is or what it means, because I've been trying to kind of just keep up with the media schedule to a certain degree. But, things have slowed down a little bit over the last 2 or 3 days. And so I think I've started, for instance, I really realized over the last 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, that honestly, I haven't even hardly been paying attention to what's been going on with Trump in his first week in office. I'm catching stories, about executive orders and policies he's putting forward. And but I haven't really been tapped into what's been going on. And I've been just trying to keep up with the kind of doing the media schedule. And so I realized, I was like, I need to be enjoying every day, that we have these 4 years of Trump in office. And so far I haven't been doing that. And I also haven't really been contemplating, what this freedom means and my ability to just get on an airplane and go wherever I want to go. I can leave the country. I couldn't leave the country for the last 4 years. So there's a lot of stuff that I can do now. And I just need to kind of like take a step back and process that and then actually start living my life too.
That's a great answer too. And I hadn't thought about that. Just before we came on the show, I don't know if you saw it, but the president signed the Laken Riley Act, which is another one of those it's been an amazing, it's 8 days now, day 8, since he took office. And good things were happening before he took the oath, but this has just been absolutely amazing, man. And I can't wait to see what your organization going forward is going to do, because I just kept remembering as I was prepping for the show, the reason I had you on the first time years ago was because I was just so impressed with the walkaway campaign and that it was convincing people not to be partisan, but to think like Americans and vote for America and vote for their prosperity and their freedom instead of being partisan. That's what's cool about it. So I can't wait to see, once you've had time to sit back and look at your strategic direction and what your operations are going to look like on the walkaway side, man. I'm excited about that because Trump, you put Trump into the White House, not you individually, but the thought process, the strategy, the concept of him doing things like going on TikTok and getting the demographic from 18 to 25-year-olds to vote for him in the larger numbers than any Republican president has ever done. The genesis of that idea was really groups like the Walkaway campaign. So I'm really excited about that. Let's take one more question from the audience before we go to the last break, and then we'll do that. Go ahead, Michelle.
We have Briggs Jeffson.
Yeah, Brandon, I'm curious, when you said your lawyers were saying that they didn't really want to, or they didn't feel like they wanted to go up to this nasty judge anymore, did you get the feeling that they privately just secretly wanted you to do a plea deal, or that them defending you might be hurting their image in the future? And secondly, were they appointed lawyers or were they people that you hired? In other words, were they public defenders?
Yeah. So again, really good question, and very intelligent question. So no, I didn't. I hired my attorneys. I had two of them. One of them I refer to as my primary attorney, and the other is my secondary attorney. They weren't in a law firm together. They were two separate attorneys working together on my case, but one of them had a very primary role. The other one had a more of like a consultant type role. It's really hard to say what the truth is in a situation where you're never going to get the evidence that you actually need to fully understand what the truth is. But I 100% many times with my primary attorney was asking myself, is he somehow being incentivized to persuade me to I'm not going to say to take a plea deal, because that was, I wanted to take a plea deal because I knew going to trial was going to be unsuccessful and a very bad decision. But I've always wondered if he fought as hard for me as he could have with the thing about the police officer's shield, which wasn't true. And I told him over and over again it wasn't true. And, just other things like that. And, he was essentially telling me, well, yes, I've talked to them, but, they're saying that, if you don't like it, you're welcome to go to trial. Well, I wasn't there, so I have to take his word for it. But there were just a lot of times when I wondered, are you fighting as hard as you can, or are you kind of just going through the motions and trying to get through this case? And I'll never know. I'll never know for sure. But I also, to be fair, I've talked to many other lawyers and many other defendants in different cases, and they had the exact same experience that we had, including lawyers that I think were more aggressive than my lawyer and probably bigger fighters than my lawyer. They also made very clear that there just was no negotiating with the DOJ, and that once the DOJ had kind of, made up their narrative and made up their story, that was it. There was no negotiation to be had.
Wow. Well, we got to take our last break, Brandon. When we come back, we'll hear from a Republican politician that doesn't think it's a good idea for the president to pardon J6ers. We'll be right back with Brandon Straka of the Walkaway Campaign and a J6 political prisoner here on the Rob Maness Show on World YouTube.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at WVWFoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at WVWFoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at WVWFoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Pretty soon.
We will watch it very closely. Yeah. Let's turn now to President Trump's decision to pardon, to give blanket pardons to everyone who was convicted of crimes on January 6th, including the 172 people who pleaded guilty to assaulting law enforcement officers. Even his own vice president said, quote, if you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. Do you believe that President Trump was wrong to issue these blanket pardons to the January 6th
Number one,
defendants?
he had the legal authority to do it, but I fear that you'll get more violence. Pardoning the people who went into the Capitol and beat up a police officer violently, I think was a mistake, because it seems to suggest that's an okay thing to do. Kamala Harris wanted to raise bail money for people burning down Minneapolis. Biden pardoned half his family going out the door. I think most Americans, if this continues, to see this as an abuse of the pardon power, that we'll revisit the pardon power of the president if this continues. But as to pardoning violent people who beat up cops, I think that's a mistake.
So you think it was a mistake by President Trump to issue these blanket pardons?
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking with Brandon Straka of the Walkaway Campaign about his experience post-January 6th with the legal system and all that means. And now that the pardons have been given, and Brandon, I'm picking on Lindsey Graham, but he deserves it. I'm going to admit it. Look, now's not the time to sit there and be pontificating about how this is going to increase more violence. He just falls into the trap that the last clip we showed with the regime media allowing the folks like us to be called Nazis and brown shirts, and it's going to be more violence. And I totally disagree with his perspective on that, especially when, this is my opinion, I want to get your take on it. A lot of these people that were accused of violence, we've seen videos in the last 10 days prove that the police on the other side of the building actually fired non-lethal munitions into the crowd first, and that's where the violence got initiated. So, a lot of these charges are like, well, I held up my hand and to keep the police officer from hitting somebody, and they're getting charged with assault. I don't know what your take is on it, but and I know you weren't over on the other side either. But gosh, at some point we've got to be fair, and we've got to look at this clear-eyed, don't we? I think you're muted.
I'm so sorry. My apologies. Yes, and I have a huge appreciation for the fact that you have framed your response the way that you did, because not that many people on our side of the aisle, unfortunately, people like Lindsey Graham and a number of other people, especially many Republicans in Congress, they don't know anything about January 6th. I mean, they haven't taken the time to try to understand what actually happened or why people pled guilty to the things they pled guilty to. They're very stupid and uninformed, and they just believe whatever CNN or Huffington Post or NBC or whatever says about January 6th, and they're just repeating the government's talking points. Like, they don't understand that a lot of people were standing there peacefully and they got attacked, or, to your point, pepper sprayed or shot or hit on the head with batons or, a number of other things, and found themselves in a defensive posture. And then the moment they started defending themselves, the DOJ says, oh, well, you put your hands on a police officer, and don't explain the context of why the person did that. And then suddenly, again, the person's being charged with 10 felonies and 150 years worth of charges. Or they can either plead down to 1 felony or 4 misdemeanors or whatever. Well, of course they're going to do that. And then they have to sign the piece of paper saying that they're the one who initiated violence against the police. These guys have no idea what actually happened. They don't care. They're not interested. They're just interested in trying to, say whatever will, get them out of the crosshairs of the left-wing media, because they're not courageous and they're not even interested in finding out the truth. So that's what it is.
Yeah, and I hope J6ers like you support a thorough investigation into this whole debacle, all the way from the political to the criminal side, because we've got to get to the bottom of it, or Graham is right about one thing: there will be more violence, and it will come from the left, like it continues to come from the left, because they don't get even arrested for it. Well, we're almost out of time. I want to take one more hand from the audience. Shell, go ahead, but make it quick, because we got to let him go.
Yes, sir. Brandon, you received a lot of flack when you did your plea deal. Tell me how you felt when people leveled allegations against you for turning on or turning in other J6ers.
Well, I mean, it wasn't true. But so essentially what Shell's referring to is, so in order to get a plea deal with the government, one of their requirements was that you would have to sit down and interview with the FBI and DOJ. So they sit down, they ask you a list of questions. I'm sure everyone's interview was different according to who they are and who they know and why they were there and what have you. In my case, I was asked a lot of questions about a lot of conservative influencers and well-known people in the conservative movement. And I didn't have any information to implicate anybody in any crimes, and I made that abundantly clear because, like, for instance, one of the people they were really interested in going after was Ali Alexander. And, at the time, Ali Alexander and I weren't even really good friends. I mean, we actually really didn't even have a friendship, but the truth was, like, I didn't have any evidence that he had done anything wrong or that he had committed a crime. I don't think anybody committed a crime. I mean, other than the people who maybe, temporarily lost their minds and broke a window or something. But anyway, so I answered their questions about these various people. And then what they did was they took what was supposed to be a sealed document, because these interviews with the FBI and DOJ are supposed to be private. They're supposed to be a sealed thing, but they leaked mine to the media. And so then the media took them, and the media said that I provided information about all of these people in order to get a plea deal. Technically, that's true. I did provide information about those people, and it was a part of getting a plea deal. The problem is the implication was that I was providing criminal information, which I was not. And none of these people that I was asked questions about were ever charged with a crime, convicted of a crime, or accused of a crime. So the media tried to make it into a thing that I was informing and implicating people. That was never true. And that was obviously very hurtful. In fact, to me, it was the most hurtful thing about everything I went through with January 6th. Because the reason why it was so hurtful is because I actually thought that I was doing an honorable thing by sitting down and having a conversation and being like, look, there's nothing here. None of these people did anything wrong. Like, and then the media turned it into that I was turning all of those people in. So they turned what I thought was an honorable thing into a very dishonorable thing. And it did hurt me very badly.
Yeah, they're afraid of us, of the Americans, that people like us that voted for Donald Trump and put him back in office. And that's what they try to do, is divide us so that we're fighting against each other. I try to push back on that stuff all the time. Well, I know you got to go here in a minute, Brandon, but real quick, tell folks where they can find you. I know I've seen your X account is there, but I heard you were locked out of it. Where else can people go to find you, to join the Walkaway campaign and to support you and find out what's going to be happening with that?
Yeah, well, my account on X is now unlocked, so people can follow me on X at Brandon Straka. My last name is spelled Straka. Please follow the Walkaway campaign on X at Real Walkaway. If you want to submit, be a part of the Walkaway community, submit a story, share a testimonial, go on Facebook and join the new hashtag Walkaway campaign group. Facebook deleted our group after January 6th. We'd grown to over 500,000 people, but we're starting again. We're somewhere around 45,000 people in our new group, so we'd love to keep that growing. And you can always learn more about Walkaway at walkawaycampaign.com. But I'd highly encourage everyone to please join our new Facebook group and follow us on X.
Well, thank you, sir. God bless you, and thanks for supporting other J6ers. I know I see you doing that, and I appreciate it. You're the first post-pardon political prisoner from J6 that I've had on the show. I hope to get many others to tell their stories, and we can get the truth out, and I really appreciate you helping us out.
Thank you. Thanks, Colonel.
Bye-bye. Well, folks, Brandon Straka of the Walkaway campaign, they're telling his story, which is just the first of many that we're going to have. I'm reaching out to other J6 prisoners that I both know, have interviewed before the J6 debacle happened. They were just guests on my show as part of being either a political conservative or something like that. But now they have the opportunity, they can talk and speak the truth about what these terrible experiences have occurred in their lives, what it's done to their lives, what they need to be restored if possible, even though it's almost impossible to restore everything in these people's lives, and to also allow our audience to embrace them once more as Americans. Go follow them, support them. We want to come together. As Brandon mentioned at the beginning of the show, I know my humility drives me to say I have a small show. I know that the audience is quite large, and I deeply appreciate you guys and all of subscribers, both paid and free, that you do to my platforms. I really do appreciate it. But we are the media, as Elon Musk says. Brandon Straka knows that. That's why you need to follow him. He's part of that, too, and a big part of the independent media that has grown well before the January 6th issue and will continue to grow and overcome the regime media, the fake media, the fake news, the legacy media. We are breaking it down, and it's our audiences that are bringing the truth to the American people, to each other. And here's the most important place we need to bring the truth to the men and women that say they know everything and think they know everything, that are sitting in the halls of Congress and those Senate and congressional office buildings that think they know better than we do. We need to bring the truth to them through our media and through our political campaigning, because we're going to primary these rhinos and get them out of office and put America First patriots that are not career politicians into those seats. We're going to do it one at a time if we have to, because that's how America reestablish itself as a land of freedom, peace, and prosperity and strength as the best gift to humankind that man has ever given. God bless you all. I'll see you tomorrow on Truth Thursday here at Worldview Tube.